The sun had barely lifted above the dry Arizona plains when the dust clouds started rising behind a column of horses galloping hard toward the lonely ranch at the edge of Coyote Ridge. The ranch belonged to Elias Crow, a man locals rarely saw except when he rode into town for salt, bullets, and the occasional bottle of whiskey. He lived alone, spoke only when needed, and carried himself with a quiet heaviness that suggested a past soaked in shadows. Rumors said he had once fought with the Cherokee in distant wars. Others claimed he had been raised by them after his family disappeared in a border raid, but no one knew the whole truth. Only that he bore a silence in his eyes that most men didn't dare challenge. But not everyone respected silence in the West, and not everyone feared the wrong man. The Black Ridge Gang, a notorious group of rustlers led by Garen Pike, had spent weeks searching for someone who had stolen 2 of their prized Mustangs. Tracks led them across riverbeds and canyons until they finally ended at Elias's ranch, where a single horse, one of their own, stood tied at his corral. They didn't know. Elias had found the Mustang, wounded on the roadside, and had tended to it out of compassion. They didn't care. Garen Pike believed in one thing: no man takes from him without paying in blood. As Elias returned from chopping wood, he noticed movement on the horizon, the silhouettes of armed riders cutting through the morning glare. He set the axe aside slowly, calm as still water, and walked to his porch. There, carved faintly into the doorframe, was a symbol he hadn't touched in years, the Cherokee protection mark, placed long ago by the elder who raised him. It meant home of the spared, a warning to enemies that the spirits walked the grounds. Elias hoped he'd never need it. He whispered a breath of regret as he saw the riders closing in. The gang surrounded his ranch like wolves circling their prey, cocking their rifles, spitting tobacco, eyes glowing with arrogance. Garen Pike rode forward, a smirk stretching across his scarred face. "You stole from me, old man." Elias didn't flinch. "Found him bleeding by the ridge. He wasn't yours anymore." The gang erupted in laughter, mocking Elias's calm, thinking him weak or fearful, mistaking silence for surrender. Garen leaned forward. "All I see is a man who's gonna die on his own porch." Elias's hand twitched slightly at his side, but he didn't reach for the gun yet. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," he said quietly, his voice chilling in its certainty. Garen spat. "I understand you got 1 minute to kneel." Before Elias could answer, one of the gang members, confused by the symbol carved on the ranch door, pointed at it. "Boss, that mark looks like one of them Indian things." Garen barked. "I don't care about some scratch on a door." But the youngest gunman, Tommy Lorne, went pale. "No, that's a Cherokee omen. My pa used to tell me they carved that to protect bloodlines. Only those marked by the tribe, or chosen by them, get to use it." The gang laughed again, but not all of them with true humor. Unease trickled through them like cold water. They didn't know Elias wasn't just chosen. He was blood, raised, trained, shaped by traditions most white men never lived to understand. Garen didn't like uncertainty. He fired without warning. The bullet tore into Elias's shoulder, knocking him from the porch and sending up a cloud of dust. The gang whooped and cheered, but as the dust settled, they noticed something strange. The wind suddenly picked up, swirling violently, carrying with it a faint whispering sound like chanting from another world. The horses snorted nervously, some rearing back. The young rider turned ghost white. "Boss, we gotta go. You shoot a Cherokee-marked man on protected land. Ain't no good comes from that." Garen cursed him for cowardice, but even he couldn't deny the unsettling shift in the air. Behind him, the Mustang Elias had rescued began stomping furiously, pulling at its reins as if sensing a storm no one else could see. On the ground, Elias gritted his teeth against the pain, his eyes sharpening not with fear but with memories. Memories of nights sitting by the fire while warriors painted symbols of honor on his arms. Memories of learning to hear the forest the way others hear breathing. Memories of an oath to protect any who bore the mark. And now he would have to call on those memories again. As Garen raised his pistol to finish the job, Elias slowly pushed himself upright, blood running down his arm, dust clinging to his face, but fire burning in his eyes. He stared at the gang, not as prey, but as a warrior awakened. "You made your choice," Elias whispered, low and deadly. "Now you live with the spirits." And for the first time, the Black Ridge Gang felt true fear. Silence blanketed the ranch as the gang froze. their arrogance sinking into dread as Elias rose to his feet, like a man refusing to die simply because the world expected him to. Blood dripped from his shoulder into the dirt, but his steps were steady, slow and unnervingly calm, as if pain were nothing but a passing visitor. The gang's horses shifted uneasily, ears pinned back, nostrils flaring at an unseen force. A faint rumble vibrated through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. Garen Pike tightened his grip on his revolver, suddenly unsure of himself. "Shoot him," he barked, but hesitation flickered. In his men's eyes, something they had never dared before. Elias didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he lifted his hand and pressed it against the Cherokee mark on his door, bowing his head. A single breath escaped him, more prayer than word. The wind stopped instantly, replaced by a stillness so absolute it felt unnatural, as if the world itself were listening. The youngest rider, Tommy, whispered hoarsely, "Boss, this ain't right. My pa said spirits guard folks like him." Garen snarled, but his voice cracked. "There ain't no spirits, load up!" But before they could fire, a sound rolled across the plain, a low, resonant howl, rising from somewhere beyond the ridge. Coyotes. Yet, it wasn't their normal cry. It was rhythmic, layered, almost like chanting. Elias lifted his gaze, and the gang stepped back as they saw his eyes change, not physically, but in depth. The softness was gone. What stared back at them were the eyes of a trained warrior who had spent years mastering calm in chaos. "You spilled Cherokee blood on marked soil," Elias said quietly, "and the land remembers." The gang's bravado shattered. One rider fired a panicked shot, the bullet striking the doorframe inches from Elias's head. The moment it hit the carved mark, the bullet flattened midair with a spark, skittering harmlessly to the ground. Panic surged through the gang. Horses reared, men cursed, and Tommy bolted from his saddle, falling to the dirt and crawling backward in terror. Garen tried to regain control, but fear hollowed his voice. "Elias Crow, you step back or I'll—" Elias stepped forward. That was all it took. The earth beneath Garen's horse shifted slightly. Not a quake, not a collapse, but a subtle tremor that sent the animal into a frenzy. It bucked violently, sending Garen crashing into the dust. Before he could stand, Elias was beside him, towering over the gang leader with a silent, deadly presence. The other gang members fumbled for their guns. But by then Elias had already reached for the tomahawk, hanging beside his door, a weapon he hadn't touched in years. The moment he gripped it, the wind howled again, this time stronger, lifting sand and dust into a swirling veil around them. Garen raised his pistol, but Elias spun the tomahawk with such precision that he struck Garen's hand, knocking the weapon away without breaking bone. It was not an act of revenge, it was discipline. "Leave," Elias said. "Take your men and never return." The gang stared in disbelief. He had the power to kill them all, yet he offered mercy. It was mercy that terrified them more than bloodshed, because it came from a man who clearly didn't fear them. Garen crawled backward, face white as chalk. "This ain't over," he whispered shakily. "You'll regret—" Elias stepped forward and Garen's words died instantly. "If you return," Elias said, "the spirits won't stop me next time." One by one, the gang scrambled onto their horses or fled on foot, driven not by defeat but by primal fear. Within minutes they vanished into the horizon, leaving Elias standing alone in the dust, breathing heavily, blood soaking his sleeve. He swayed, exhaustion overtaking him, and collapsed to one knee. The Mustang he rescued trotted toward him, nudging his arm gently as if guarding him. Elias offered a faint smile, whispering, "We're both still here." He dragged himself into the house, bandaged his shoulder, and lit a single lantern as evening settled across the plains. The Cherokee mark on his door glowed softly in the firelight, and he whispered to it with gratitude. His heritage, his ancestors, his protectors. As night fell, Elias sat on his porch, watching the stars awaken above the ridge, knowing the gang wouldn't dare return again. The land had chosen him, the spirits had protected him, and his silence, so misunderstood, was finally respected as the power it had always been. And for anyone watching the story unfold, Elias's journey stood as a reminder that strength doesn't come from noise or rage, but from knowing exactly who you are, even when the world tries to forget. And folks, if stories like this inspire you, tales of courage, mystery, heritage, and unstoppable spirit, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more powerful stories to life, and together we keep these legends alive.